Hey, hello, welcome to WC 402, week 3. This week we're going to talk about some conservation practices and discuss biodiversity, and then get into discussion of invasive species. And then I'm going to jumpstart you on a project that you will have the next 2 weeks to do, in which you're going to be able to dream a little bit and be creative. And this kind of goes off the discussion piece from last week, where I'm going to have you take a piece of land and um, develop it into your own project, where you will like homesteading. Okay. uh, or you could develop a park or an area for a municipality. Okay. In that case, you'd be, like presenting a project to city council or county council for a municipal type property. Okay, so there's going to be several different things you can actually do on that. Okay, but anyway, this little unit's on conservation and biodiversity. Okay, biodiversity, we see um, many examples of biodiversity in the world, it'll be different relative to where you're at. Okay, like if you're in Indiana or in Illinois, you see the most biodiversity in the woodlands. Okay, or in a lake or a pond. Okay, or around a lake or pond, or wetlands or swamp area. Uh, Greatest biodiversity here. However, if you go to different states or different countries, you will see it looking quite different. Okay, and different types of animals, different types of plants. And that's what biodiversity is all about. Is if you have a really diverse area, you have a lot of different types of plants and a lot of different types of animals. And biodiversity is what's preferred in nature. So typically in an area where you have a lot of biodiversity, um, you also typically have a lot of stability. Okay, in the ecosystem. That's what makes it more stable, is more biodiversity. Okay. Um, but there are different levels of biodiversity that you can look at as well, besides different areas of the world or different states. You can look at biodiversity within species or within individuals. Okay. Just like when we talk humans, where you have a community that is diverse, then you have several different ethnic groups. And like you can have Hispanics, you can have Asian, you can have white, Caucasian, English descent. Um, and and people tend to understand that pretty well, that you have diversity. Well, you can also have diversity in animals. Okay, so you can like in a pond, if you have more diversity of fish in the pond, then you have several different types of fish in that pond. Okay, but you can also go within the species itself and have some diversity of like deer or squirrels, and see differences in individuals in each of the different species. Like deer, you can ones that love to hunt deer, you can see diversity in particularly bucks and the antlers that they grow. Okay, and the size of their antlers has a lot to do with genetics, but it also has a lot to do with what they feed on. Okay, and what minerals they're getting, and that's where some of the hunters have learned to plant food plots and provide feed for deer and actually get deer to grow bigger and better racks. Okay, but that would be a diversity factor within just one species. Okay, but then you can take a look. Like I'm outside here and got my woodlands behind me. Um, it's a pretty diverse woods here, in that I have several different species. There's probably 10 to 12 different species of trees in my woods. Okay, and that's where if a woodland has been disturbed or has been logged, a lot of times you tremendously decrease the diversity in the woods. Okay, and of course, diversity is preferred. Okay, so there's several different examples. Okay, you can also have ecosystem diversity in an area, like you could have woodlands in an area, then open meadows, then a swamp, and then across the way a pond. Okay, so if on a piece of property you have a lot of ecosystem diversity, you have that type of setup. Okay, so you can have varying from woodlands to grasses to maybe a food plot or prairie grasses. Um, you can change the diversity on your land. That's going to be part of the project. How have you guys doing? Okay. Okay. And as I was saying, that biodiversity is not evenly distributed on the earth, and I think most of us know that if we've traveled very much. You can go from desert areas in southwest U.S. where you typically see much less diversity to tropical regions down in Florida where you see a good bit more diversity, or even the woodlands in Indiana and Illinois, there's pretty decent diversity. But if you go to northern Canada or northern Alaska, you don't see much diversity because you don't have a lot of growth of plants. Okay. Now then you have what we call endemic species, and we have them here, but we have them in different places around the world. Okay, like you don't find um, panda bears in the United States. They are not endemic here. However, you go to China, they are endemic to China. Okay, just like kangaroos are endemic to Australia. Okay, you only find them there. So that's an endemic species. Beaver are endemic to Indiana and Illinois along rivers and streams. Okay, armadillos you'll find in a lot of the southern states. Okay, but they're endemic to given areas, meaning that they're not found everywhere. Okay, agriculture. Agriculture has been taking place for hundreds of years. Of course, has made life possible as we know it. However, agriculture creates a condition, what we'd call a monoculture. And you by having all the farm fields we have, particularly throughout Indiana and Illinois and Iowa, we create monocultures to where you don't have any diversity out there. In fact, a farmer doesn't want diversity in a field because he doesn't want the competition of the weeds and the grasses and all that stuff in the crops. Okay, however, it does create problems. Okay, by having a monoculture, um, certain insects, particularly uh, that feed on soybeans or feed on corn, or like rootworm, um, become more and more of a problem because exactly what they like to eat is right there in huge amounts. Okay. But anyway, agriculture it has been needed for us and to produce the crops that we need to sustain the human population. However, that tends to do away with biodiversity, which brings about problems. Okay. The biggest threats to biodiversity, besides agriculture, um, is pollution. Uh, we overexploit some species like fishing, um, whether it's salmon and halibut and grouper and tuna. Um, we have overfished for a few hundred years, really. Okay. So, of course, we have limits and so forth in place now on fishing, particularly if you go to Alaska and go like halibut fishing, you can only keep two. That's to kind of slow down the overexploitation of species. But now um, pollution is a problem, of course, and that ranges from soil and water pollution, but also acid rain and the pollutants in the air have had big impacts on um, types of vegetation in the world and animals. Okay, climate change. Climate change is a um, developing problem through time, and through climate changes in climate will change the types of biomes that can effectively grow in areas. So that's where you see a change in that through time. However, that has happened through time. Okay, from back before we were here, and you had the ice ages and so forth. You had such climate change that changed the ecosystems that were in given areas of the world. Okay, then a huge problem that's really developing across this country are invasive species and diseases that are brought in um, to areas. Okay, invasive species in Indiana, they're real problem right now is your bush honeysuckle in the woods, which I've cleaned my woodlands up of. But you also have things like um, autumn holly and multiflora rose, vining honeysuckle, or Asian honeysuckle. Down south, you've got the kudzu. But then if you go to some of the animal species that are real problem, um, the emerald ash borer, which is really an insect, has taken out all of our ash trees. Uh, and then in the Wabash River and Illinois River, you have the Asian carp, which will become a huge problem, and zebra mussels. Okay, but if you go to different areas of the world, there are other invasive species to talk about, and one of the ones not really is across the world somewhere, but down in Florida. Florida, there's so many different invasive species, from snakes to lizards, uh, that they don't have cold weather, so those types of animals won't die naturally. Okay, in fact, it's a perfect environment for a whole lot of them, and they have so many different invasive species now in Florida that have created quite a problem. Okay, so and the invasive species are a threat to biodiversity because they tend to do away with the diversity in like a woodlands or in a pond, like in or a river, like Illinois River with the Asian carp. They're just pushing out, and they eat like crazy, um, and they succeed and grow in great numbers, and it hurts all the rest of the species of fish that live in the river, and their numbers go down. So Asian carp populations go up. In woodlands, if you have a whole bunch of bush honeysuckle in your woodlands, you'll notice that nothing grows underneath bush honeysuckle. So that's where you're doing away with diversity in the woods. Bush honeysuckle shades out everything underneath, so you're everything from wildflowers to sapling trees can't grow under it. Okay, but they also they found that the um, honeysuckle releases a essentially a toxin into the soil that you just don't see other plants grow under it. Okay. Um, so biodiversity has been threatened because of invasive species. So here I'm showing you some of the invasive species, and I've already talked some of them. That's just some pictures of them. These are the ones common around here in Indiana and Illinois. You have your bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, multiple rose, the emerald ash borer, which has taken out so many of our ash trees, and then Asian carp. And there's actually 3 or 4 different species of the Asian carp. Okay, here invasive species in Florida that are not native there, but you can certainly find them in numbers now. There's all kinds of pythons down there now from people releasing them. Um, both Burmese pythons and ball pythons, iguanas, several different types of lizards, actually. Um, and then in the waters, you got your lionfish, and then plants that's not only Florida, but all the way up into Kentucky is the kudzu vines. And it is very, very destructive to the woodlands. You can see it along the interstates. Okay, and then feral hogs is our big problem in not only Florida, but several southern states. Okay, here's just some data here that where you're looking at extinctions of plants and animals through time. And on every one of these, what you see is uh, as we go through time, which this is showing up to 2018, um, we've had more and more extinctions of species. Okay, and like on the one graph here on the right, it's showing the amphibians, mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish. And this is showing you the percentage of species that have been driven to extinction through time. So here's where your 2.5% of amphibians, okay, have been lost um, in the last couple hundred years. Okay. And then down here, this was just showing you that the relative number of different species in a forest area. As you get, like, if I look at an acre of woodlands, for a healthier woodlands, I would find 8 to 10 or more different species of trees in a nice stable, um, more mature growth woodlands. Okay, the less diversity that you see per acre, the less stable the woodland really is. Okay, and so that's what this is kind of showing you. As your forest area increases, you would expect to see the number of species. And you can also talk that in regards to animals as well. Okay, and this is just showing you through the time periods. Okay, um, the relative to amount of extinctions that have occurred with animals. Okay. Now then, what we want to do, and what if we're being more responsible citizens, being more responsible and more sustainable, we want to try to restore and increase biodiversity around us. Okay, we'd like it on a global scale. However, each one of us um, can do it on our own. Okay, on our own properties in our own areas. We can serve on town and city and county councils and try to develop uh, parks or natural areas. Uh, and sometimes this comes in the form of creating a trail or bike path or whatever, and then developing it around it. Okay, but the important thing is to restore diversity, restore habitat, okay, protect areas from further expansion of industry or the city or the town. Okay, and a key to this is getting everyone on board. Okay, then another responsibility that we need to take is getting in control of our invasive species. Okay, on our own land and on public lands. Um, because as more and more of the invasive species develop, we're losing our own native species. Okay. And a lot of invasive species come about because of the plants that we plant in our yards. They brought in so many different exotic species through time that people seen it just as a nice looking bush to put in the front yard or nice ground cover to hold a bank next to a house. And then those got away from us. Okay, that's the way you like your vining honeysuckle and the kudzu and winter creeper and some other invasives uh, have got out there into our woodlands. And the same thing with the Asian carp were brought here because they eat like crazy and they put them in ponds to eat up vegetation, but then they got out of the ponds and got into our other waterways and our rivers. Okay. But anyway, that's what our project's going to be about. And I'm going to make a separate video for the project. Okay. In which I will put that video on the assignment itself to give you an explanation of the project. But anyway, that's kind of our concepts for this week. Please have a good week. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know.